All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Boomerang Radio Show, coming to you each and every Sunday, 3 p.m. on the West Coast. That makes it 6 p.m. on the East and 5 Central. Today, we've got a very special guest, so please share with your friends. You guys know how to multitask, that this is a
All
very
right.
important show. Got a special guest, and that is Mr. Peter Ratcliffe on. Before we get to our special guest, let me introduce to you our panelists. I see Ann Wooten Taylor. Hello, my sister.
Hey, how are you today?
I am terrific. I'm excited, looking forward to this particular interview. Well, we really
Awesome.
don't have interviews, we have conversations.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. And my buddy, Mr. Mike Ward, aka Mad Mike. Hey, Mad.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And my groove brother, he's also a co-host and panelist on our Tuesday show called Groove Swing Speaks. Groove Swing Speaks. And I was speaking to T-Air last week, and he was telling me about this very, very interesting gentleman by the name of Mr. Peter Ratcliffe. I said, wow, I've got to talk to him. I said, do you have his contact information? He said, I sure do. So I thought it's only fitting that these two friends come back together, unite again, because Peter, Tia, other than the Mr. Radcliffe himself, he knows a lot about Mr. Radcliffe. He's attended one of his classes. And so, Tia, I would like for you to do the honors of introducing Mr. Peter Radcliffe.
All right. Hello, Peter. I'm going to start by reading your bio real quick. Peter Ratcliffe has spent the last 45 years exploring the intersections of race and class in the development of the United States, from our economy, politics, and popular culture to the emergence and evolution of social movements for progressive change. These concerns have driven his research, writing, teaching, and activism. In 1981, he earned his PhD in history from the University of Pittsburgh, writing his dissertation about the development of the working class in Richmond, Virginia, from 1865 to 1890. I actually have his book in my hand. This became the basis of his book, Black Labor in Richmond, Virginia, 1865 to 1890, which was published in hardcover by Temple University Press in 1984 and in paperback by University of Illinois Press in 1989. From 1982 to 2012, Peter taught labor, immigration, and African American history at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And in 2014, with his partner, Beth Cleary, I hope I said that right, co-founded the East Side Freedom Library with the mission to inspire solidarity, work for justice, and advocate for equality for all. Peter has also published books on postal workers, the Hormel strike of 1985 to 86, and the unionism of food service workers. And he has published articles in 10 books and more than a dozen journals. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Peter Ratcliffe to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Peter. Welcome. As a matter of fact, I was so excited about it. I sent Ann a text yesterday. I said, Ann, you must have this gentleman on your show. Ann has a show called the Eden as an Act of Worship Ministries radio show, which airs on Saturday. So, Peter, I'm already working you, brother, before we get started. And then meet Mad Mike, Mike Ward. He's the co-host on Mad Mike and Wild Will Coast to Coast. If you love music, and that airs every Thursday. No, I'm sorry. Is that Thursday, Mike? Yep, it is.
Thursdays.
Thursdays, 5:15 p.m. on the West Coast, 8:15 on the East. Again,
So
Mr. Radcliffe.
the question is, does Peter like music? Because we can put him on our Coast to Coast show also.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
They're going to overwork you if you let them. They will do it.
That's true.
Well, Peter has a lot to say. So, Thierry, he has a prior engagement. I want to thank Thierry because he pushed that engagement back a half hour just to be on this broadcast. So I really appreciate that. And perhaps he might be able to come back. But Thierry, I'm going to start you off with the questioning because I think that will give us a good basis to formulate our questions later.
Okay. As you mentioned, I know Peter personally. I took one of his history classes, and let me tell you, I was very impressed with this man's depth and knowledge on like a range of subjects. And I even visited him, outside of the classroom. I came down to his East Side Freedom Library, which is, well, I guess we'll get to that at some time in the show. But let me just start off by asking you, Peter. In my view, I think you're like probably an old hippie. But how did a white guy get to be such a expert on Black history?
I grew up in a small city, New London, Connecticut. Small enough that it had only one junior high school and one high school, but a city that was shaped by the military industrial complex. There was a United States Navy submarine base. There was a General Dynamics electric boat submarine manufacturing plant. And so there were lots of African American, Puerto Rican, Filipino families, workers, students. So in my junior high school and my high school, white kids were a minority. And I spent a lot of time with young people of color at a time that we were together when Dr. King was assassinated. We were together when there were the challenge to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968. And I went off to college in the fall of 1969 with two questions. One was the American war in Vietnam an accident? And my second question was, had we actually made progress as a society, a culture, a country? Had we made progress on racial justice? And I've told generations of students ever since then that I answered those questions my first semester of college. And the question for me then became, now that I had my answers, what was I going to do with my life? And I sought out teachers. I was very fortunate that the University of Massachusetts in Amherst had developed the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Black Studies. And I was able to study with people like John Bracey, Ernie Allen, Sharif Gaylal, who was the first Algerian ambassador to the United Nations after the Algerian Revolution, Max Roach and Archie Shepp. So back to Mike's question about, am I interested in music? And so they were very generous with this white kid from Connecticut who was trying to figure out how to have an impact in the world. And that sent me off finally to graduate school, where I was under pressure. I had a fellowship to pay tuition, but I was told from Jump Street that if I didn't finish a master's thesis within 3 semesters, I would lose my funding. And my first semester, we read a book by a white scholar activist named Robert Starobin called Industrial Slavery in the Old South. And in that book, I learned that Richmond, Virginia had been the site of the largest number of enslaved men and women who worked in factories. And then I discovered there were no more books about Richmond after that. And I wondered, what happened after emancipation? Did African Americans keep their jobs? If they did they organize unions? How did their white fellow workers treat them? And so that curiosity led me to Richmond to do the research, first for my master's thesis, and then what would become my doctoral dissertation, trying to make sense of what had happened in what had been the capital of the Confederacy, what had happened within the working class. So that was how I got interested. And I have been rewarded by continuing to find relevance for that research, continuing to find ways to put, as I like to say, to put the past and the present in a conversation with each other. And I think it's a rich conversation and a conversation that we need to have. I only stumbled the other day, this week, over the fact that I think it was Thursday, the 18th of September, was the 175th anniversary of the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act. And
I didn't realize that.
I hadn't. An African-American friend schooled me on that. And because I had brought up that a dear friend of mine who is a cartoonist, Mike Konopacki, Mike had done a cartoon drawing a parallel between the Fugitive Slave Act and the treatment of undocumented immigrants today. And there is that conversation between the past and the present that we need to continue to have in this culture. And among so many things, it's one of those things that Trump wants to slam the door on. He doesn't want us to have those kinds of conversations.
Can you give us like an example of one of the parallels between the Fugitive Slave Act and how the immigrants are being treated today?
Sure. The Fugitive Slave Act, as I said, passed in September of 1850, required Northern police, Northern authorities to arrest any African American that any white person came along and pointed at him or her and said, "That's my slave, and they've run away and I want them back." And the federal government required local authorities to enforce that law. Fortunately, abolitionists and activists interfered. Now, before we came on the air, Pierre told me he's living in Los Angeles. We have seen ICE act in Los Angeles to round up people based on their skin color, makes them suspicious.
Supreme Court just gave it a thumbs up.
Supreme Court just said that's cool. That's okay. But grassroots activists in LA are putting their bodies in between ICE and those people that they want to arrest.
Right.
Doing the same thing that abolitionists did 175 years ago.
Wow.
Without knowing it.
Wow.
If they knew that history, how much more energy and confidence would they bring to the struggle today?
Wow.
Because today we know that ultimately the abolitionists won.
Right, right.
And slavery an end was put to slavery. Took a civil war to do, but it was done. And so that's such an important part of the past that still informs the present that we live with.
You mentioned how that led to, the struggle that eventually led to civil wars. Do you think history is repeating itself to that extent?
Well, that white Southern writer, William Faulkner, said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Right. Heard that.
And so I would say it's rhyming. And I think that we continue to confront the same challenges. I mean, I think in a broader sense, scholars like Cedric Johnson, Robin D.G. Kelly, who's out there in in LA at USC have
Mm,
talked about the American political economic system
mm.
as a system of racial capitalism.
All right.
And it was when slavery ruled the land, and it is today still
Mm,
a system of racial capitalism.
mm,
Not everybody is treated equally.
mm,
Not everybody has the same opportunities. And so we face the same challenge that
mm.
our ancestors faced 175 years ago.
We were talking not too long ago about the history of immigration, all the different laws that have been passed, and how when you look legally at the laws, they were intended to encourage white people to immigrate to America and discourage, say, for instance, Asian people. And unless, of course, you were a slave, black people,
Yeah.
from coming to this particular country. And we still, and I said it over and over and over and over again, this isn't a new issue. It's been going on for hundreds of years. If you ask the Native Americans, they'll say it's been a problem since about the 1500s. It's just an issue that keeps coming up. So do you think that, it being taught, say, on the college level about how our laws influence racial discrimination in this country, this thing about critical race theory being such a hot button topic, is it warranted, or is it just basically teaching the truth of how our laws reflect our society?
Yeah, I think it's teaching the truth. And I wish more people were doing it. I wish these college administrators would get a backbone
Yes.
and stand up. And actually, your point about immigration, Anne, makes me want to also mention a book which is very relevant to Mike's interests in music.
Mhm.
There is a new book with the wonderful title Brass Roots Democracy
Mm,
by a young white guy named Benjamin Barson,
mm,
who is a musician as well as a historian. It's about the development of Black music in New Orleans
mm,
as a product of immigration from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, and how that music, what became the marching brass bands, the
mhm,
second line at funerals, how that music developed in struggle in
mm,
New Orleans against Jim Crow in the aftermath of the end of Reconstruction, against 20th century racism, and
mhm,
how that music was central to the sharing of knowledge with African Americans and Creoles,
mm.
building that knowledge together to build political struggle for racial justice.
Mm.
It's such a brilliant book,
Wow.
and I thought it needs to have a DVD tucked in.
Right.
Where's that DVD? And
Right.
of course,
The
we
name of
know
it, grassroots, what technology? What was it?
Grassroots Democracy.
Democracy.
Wow.
Mm.
And he is a baritone saxophone player,
Wow.
and plays the baritone saxophone that had belonged to Fred Ho,
Mm,
a Chinese American jazz musician and member of the Black Panther Party on the West Coast.
mm,
And when Fred was dying, he sent his books to the East Side Freedom Library and his baritone saxophone to
mm.
Ben Barson.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and Grassroots Democracy is like the best book I've read in the last 10 years.
Wow.
I can't
Saying a
praise
lot.
it enough. Yeah.
I would love to talk to him. It sounds
Yeah.
if he would be willing. Yeah.
I'll send Brother William his email address, and yeah, he would be great.
Well, I apologize for interjecting so quickly with questions. It's just something that popped into my head. Did you want to ask him something else before? Mr. I can't see your name.
Yeah. Here.
Okay. I apologize
Um,
for butting
th-
in.
th- I could rattle on questions after questions, but
Mhm.
we started. We mentioned what's going on in modern day with Trump and everything, and I had intended to start in the past and work our way up to Trump, but since he's already come up,
Mm.
I just want to ask you because I don't think enough people are taking it serious enough, but maybe I'm just paranoid. But in your opinion, how much danger are we in with Trump?
Well, I think that I'm around people who are debating, are we already in fascism?
Yep.
Or is fascism just around the corner? And, in the last week, we've seen them pull the plug on Jimmy Kimmel,
Mhm.
a month ago on Stephen Colbert.
Mhm.
Free speech is disappearing.
Mhm.
We're hearing terms like nihilistic, violent extremists to
Mhm.
describe trans folks.
Wow.
Um, we're seeing, you're certainly seeing in LA, people being arrested off the streets. Here in St. Paul, Minnesota, um, my next door neighbor was arrested, who's from
Wow.
Salvador, and
Wow.
they came at 5 o'clock in the morning with something that looked like a cross between a tank and what we used to see in footage from South Africa. And they told him, called out his name, and told him to come out with his hands up, and
Wow.
they took him away.
Mm.
Some of us either have the skin privilege or the financial privilege that we feel relatively secure and safe, but all around us, um, people are being threatened or frightened.
Mm.
Um, Trump pulled the union status of
Mhm.
almost 1 million federal employees,
Mhm.
tore up their collectively bargained union agreements.
Mhm.
So we're waiting. We're not waiting because we're trying to agitate and organize and push, but we're looking for the courts. We're looking for Congress.
Mm.
We're looking for somebody to step in and say this has already gone too far.
Mhm.
And I think that people of color in this country have experienced this kind of terrorism either in their own lives or in their ancestors' lives, and we're seeing it spread now,
Mhm.
making us insecure and challenging our ability to function in a democracy, in an
Mm.
economic or political democracy, or cultural democracy. Pull the plug on these TV guys.
Is it odd to you how quickly democracy is being dismantled? I mean, it's like watching a slow motion train wreck, and screaming, for everybody to get out of the way, but nobody's moving.
Didn't Hitler kind of do it within 50 days or something?
Yeah, I mean,
Back on her point.
right. And I've seen people in the last couple days writing that the assassination of Charlie Kirk could be the Reichstag fire for the Trump administration, could be that event, right? Hitler came to power, and then there was this fire in the government building that a whole lot of historians suggest Hitler's people did.
Mm,
Uh, but that was the excuse to then crack down.
mm,
And we're starting to see that kind of cracking down. We're seeing journalists fired. This woman at the Washington Post just got fired. Uh, we're seeing this kind of closing down
mm,
um, happening all across the United States. Hopefully, it's inspiring people to fight back. And I'm certainly around folks here in Minnesota who are organizing to fight back. A week ago, 1,400 service workers at the University of Minnesota went on strike. And they built a coalition with Willie Nelson, John
Wow.
Quincy Mellencamp.
Wow.
There was a Farm Aid concert that was scheduled to happen yesterday.
Wow.
And all of these musicians said they were not going to cross a picket line.
Wow.
It was supposed to happen in a stadium on the University of Minnesota campus. And the University of Minnesota administration gave in and yielded to what the workers were demanding. Half of the 1,400 workers were first-generation immigrants, many of them from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Eastern African immigrants. And they all came to the Eastside Freedom Library to have a celebration of their victory. And for us to look out and see people embracing each other, Black people and white people, American-born people and African-born people, Mexicans, Salvadorans, Ecuadorians, Hondurans, we see something else is possible. That Donald Trump does not represent what this country can be. And the harder he pushes, the more hopefully people are going to unite together and push back. And I'm trying to teach some history in the middle of all of that, and saying we can look to our forefathers and foremothers in how they were able to organize and change things for the better.
I think Mike had a couple of questions. You wanted to ask something, Mike?
No, I'm just fascinated here. I appreciate you being here, sir. I also would like to note right off the bat here that you and I share the same barber, it appears.
Well, I have another question for you. Obviously, given your background, you had a different perspective. So I know you can't speak for every Caucasian person in America, but what is it, given your expertise as a historian, do you think is driving this willingness of the MAGA base to basically destroy the republic that's lasted for almost 250 years in order to embrace an autocrat and his races and all kinds of other ideologies?
Well, I think that thinking historically, that from the late 1930s, when the labor movement really began to grow in the United States, in the industrial manufacturing sector, in auto, in steel, in meatpacking, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president, and Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, the Social Security Act. We saw, A. Philip Randolph threaten a march on Washington in 1941, and suddenly the federal government began to open defense plants during the war to the employment of people of color. We see from that period to the mid-1970s, a period where most working class people in the United States experienced an improvement in their lives. Many because of joining unions. In the late 1960s, the civil rights movement and the women's movement had an impact, making sure that workers of color and women workers began to experience those benefits as well. And in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and we can sort of mark this with with the election of Ronald Reagan
Mhm.
and Reagan's firing of the air traffic controllers
Mhm.
in the summer of 1981.
Mm,
That we begin to see a very significant turn
mm,
in the way the American political economy would work.
mm,
So my partner and I live in a neighborhood in St. Paul
mhm,
that was a largely white, blue collar, heavily unionized neighborhood.
mm,
Beginning in the 1980s, factories began to close and jobs were moved to South Carolina or Mexico or
mm,
China.
mm,
By the time we moved into this neighborhood in the 1990s,
mhm,
15,000 unionized blue collar jobs had disappeared from this neighborhood. And
mm,
a lot of those, the white people who had held those jobs moved away.
mm,
And immigrants of color from Central America, Southeast Asia, and East Africa began to move in.
mm,
And we discovered that the white people who had stayed behind
mhm,
were susceptible to, now I'll use my academic language,
mm,
the narrative that somehow it was the immigrants' fault.
mm,
Their jobs had disappeared and that their children and grandchildren had moved away.
mm,
That was why we started the East Side Freedom Library. We wanted to create a space where people would find the resources
mhm,
and create programs where they might use music, poetry, theater, dance to tell their stories in the hopes that those descendants of Irish, German, Polish, Italian immigrants would begin to discover that immigrants today from Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Mexico,
mhm.
Ethiopia, Somalia, that those immigrants were just like their grandparents,
Right.
facing, having left for similar reasons, having faced similar challenges. And
Mhm,
we have found that it's working here in
mm.
this neighborhood. But
Wow.
there's a lot of places yet where there aren't projects like that.
Mhm,
And people are, the more that Trump and his ilk are able to keep people off the radio, to keep people out of the newspapers,
mhm,
keep them off of television,
mm,
then people are not going to hear those alternative narratives. And instead, they're going to be bombarded with this vicious narrative that somehow people of color are at fault
mm,
for the challenges that white people are facing. So,
mm,
white people are facing more challenges now than they did a generation ago. White kids today are growing up not expecting that they're going to live a better life economically than their parents or grandparents did.
mm,
They're fearful. But as they try to understand why that's happened, why those jobs went away, why they can't find a good trade, they're vulnerable to the narrative that somehow immigrants and people of color or women are at fault, are getting affirmative action advantages
mm.
over white men. And that's a critical struggle right now
It
for
is.
Well, it's amazing because when you look at it from that economic standpoint, the people who took their jobs away are the very people that they're putting into office, that they're
yes,
thinking are on their sides. They're the ones who own these mega companies that moved to
yep,
China and all these other
yep,
places because they were getting cheaper labor. It wasn't the black people who were owning the businesses. It
right,
wasn't the Latino people. It's basically uber rich white Americans who've done this, and they seem to be driving this narrative that we're not your problem. People who are brown are your problem, and DEI is your problem.
Right.
I just don't understand how
Hello.
you can fight that type of misinformation when it is so, I mean, heavily everywhere. I mean, it's on all types of crazy podcasts. People that, I mean, where people get their information from astonishes me. It's like, why would you trust this as a source? I just don't understand. So maybe maybe you have a little insight and you can help me understand why people who are supposedly educated for at least 12 years in this country seem to have absolutely no intellectual insight, when they're being misinformed or hoodwinked, so to speak.
Well, I think on the one hand, I have often over my career cited
Yes.
Carter G. Woodson's foundational text
Mhm.
published in 1926 titled "The Miseducation of the Negro."
Yeah.
And I became an educator who said it ain't only the Negro
Right.
miseducated.
Right.
You know, we're spending a lot of money in this society to make people stupid,
Right.
to not give them the history. So there's that. But on the other hand, I think that white working class people's lives are going to continue to get worse. We're seeing here in the Midwest what's happening to farmers.
Yep.
And so these tariff policies, these tax policies, the various things that the Trump administration is introducing, people are not that stupid that they can't see whose hand is behind these decisions, these policies that are making their lives worse. So I think we need people to step in and offer other explanations. And we need people to do what we've tried to do here in St. Paul, to create a space where people can use culture, have a good time, but also begin to understand how similar, how in sync their family stories really are. We had a moment at the Eastside Freedom Library where there was an exhibit about the history of treaties between the United States government and indigenous people, and how those treaties had been broken and how the land had been stolen. And we had this exhibit up and for a month, and every weekend we had a panel discussion. And one weekend on the panel, there was a Dakota elder, and there was an Oromo guy from Ethiopia. And in response to a question from someone in the audience, the Dakota guy said, my people think that the idea that you can own land is as irrational as thinking you could own your mother.
Wow.
And the Oromo guy bent over and looked at him and said, my God, my people think the same thing.
Wow.
And so if we're able to nurture conversations where people can compare their experiences and share their stories, and some of that's through music, and some of that's through poetry, and some of that's through memoir, and some of that is straight up history, but various ways that people can share that. I'm confident that we can break through this barrage and create solidarity rather than racism and hatred. And part of, to go way back historically for a minute, and we can explore this more if you're interested. What I found in Richmond was that in the middle 1880s, a labor organization called the Knights of Labor,
Hmm.
which admitted both African Americans and whites,
Hmm.
organized an independent what they called the Workingmen's Reform Party.
Hmm.
They won the election in May of 1886,
Wow.
took over the city government of
Wow.
Richmond, Virginia, 20 years after the Civil War, in
Wow.
what had been the capital of the Confederacy. Black and white workers together took over the city government. The
Wow.
issue was the building of a new city hall,
Hmm.
and the Knights of Labor had circulated petitions that they wanted that new city hall to be built out of local material by local workers on the 8-hour day, paid a union wage.
Hmm.
And in the language that they used in 1886, that colored workers as well as white workers would have the opportunity for skilled jobs.
Wow.
Concept.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
and
Nice.
the sitting city council looked at that petition, and they might as well have been quoting Ronald Reagan from the future.
Wow.
They said, we would be fiscally irresponsible if we built it that. And the Knights of Labor stormed out of the meeting and said, if that's what you think, we're going to take your jobs.
Hmm.
And we're going to build the city hall the way we want.
Yeah,
And
see how
they
you like it.
did.
Praise
They
the
won
Lord.
the election and they built the building. And the
Wow.
building is sitting there in Richmond.
Wow.
And
To
as
this day.
I'm all too fond of saying, there ain't no plaque on the building that tells the story of how it got built.
Mhm.
Right.
Generation upon generation of white and black kids have grown up in Richmond, visited that building, and never learned how that building came to be built. That's a crime.
I think it's similar to what the history of Los Angeles, but it sounds a lot like what happened in Los Angeles. You had Hispanic people, Latino
Mhm.
people, and Black people who founded Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And yet the people who live there have no clue
Right.
that those were the people who founded that city.
Yep.
It was built by those folks. And now it's been all whitewashed. You would think
Yep.
that it's a city that's just been, put there for rich white people to enjoy and everybody else to struggle
Yeah.
to make ends meet. I
Yep.
must say I'm really fascinated by your historical knowledge and everything that you've taught us so far, and I really appreciate you being here with us. I know you said you couldn't stay for very long.
Oh
But
no, I'm here for the full run, and
okay,
That was
okay.
Tia.
That was what?
Thierry had to scoot.
Oh, okay. That was him. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought that was you.
No.
Okay.
I'm thrilled to have an audience. And
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
We're certainly thrilled to have you. I'm just sitting back and letting the panel ask the questions. I have quite a few. I just wanted everybody else to get theirs in. And Tia, he had another previous engagement. He's going to try to come back. This is fascinating. Mike, before I go on and ask Mike, do you have any questions so far?
I do. I've been making notes here, and I am fascinated with your knowledge. And I will say that your background and mine are probably a little bit similar. I grew up in a farming community that's in Southern California called Oxnard, which we refer to as Oxnard. It was founded by the Oxnard brothers that grew sugarcane, and now the Oxnard claim to fame is strawberries, and they do very well. So I grew up in a farming community. My high school and my parents contributed greatly to my perspective on life, and I'm extremely happy I grew up the way that I did. My high school was about a third Black, a third white, a third Hispanic, and a smattering of Asians. And we, growing up in that environment, didn't really see color. We knew there was problems out there in the world, but in our little sphere of influence, we just didn't have those problems. My parents were World War II vets. and they say there's no atheists in the foxhole. Well, I would extrapolate it to that. I would say when you're getting shot at or you're getting saved, you don't care what color the person is next to you. So I am extremely thankful that I grew up the way that I did. Am I unaware of the strife that has occurred throughout not just the United States but the world with regard to man's inhumanity to man? No, I'm not oblivious to it, and it'd be nice if we could fix it. So I guess my overall question to you, and this is pretty wide scope, I'm sorry to do this to you, and you don't have to take up a whole bunch of time doing it, but are we better off now as a nation since our inception? Are we better off now, or were we better off in another time point in the U.S. history? And if we're not better off, how would you fix it?
Well, I think that there have been moments when if the measuring stick for what does it mean to be better off is that, as you described your background, Mike, of people not seeing race, or me coming from a labor perspective saying there's more solidarity between people from diverse backgrounds. There have been moments in American history where that's been the case. I've recently read a terrific piece that a historian named Matt Nichter, who teaches at Rollins College in Florida, that Matt has written about the way that the union, the United Packing House Workers of America, organized around Emmett Till's mom in the aftermath of his murder, and how that union in 1954, 55, 56, especially in Chicago, but also in Louisiana, in different parts of the country, organized around commitment to racial justice. We could look at the Auto Workers Union in Detroit in the late 1930s during the sit-down strikes, and look at the way African American and white workers not only worked together but occupied the factory together and stood up to cops together. And we can find specific examples at different points in American history. But I think that that we have the most diverse that the United States has ever been is today. We have more people from all over the world living in the United States. One of the things that I feel that I've learned over the years is how much we, those of us who are raised here, how much we can learn from our new neighbors. The values of cooperation, mutual aid, caring for each other that they bring with them, how we can learn from them and incorporate that into our value system and our way of doing things, rather than saying we have to Americanize them, which means make them more individualistic and more competitive. How do we build on these resources? How do we build on the history of hundreds of years of what African Americans have experienced, of what indigenous people have experienced? My partner Beth is an activist for climate justice, and is finding that we have so much to learn from our Native American neighbors about how to live with nature, how to live with what we call the extra human world, how to live with that in a respectful and productive way rather than a dominating way.
Right.
So I think that we have more resources now than people in the United States have ever had. And the question is whether those who become aware of that are able to bring those resources into relationship with people who are blaming the wrong miscreants for what's gone wrong with our lives. So Beth and I laugh a lot about she's a pessimist and I'm an optimist. And I confess that Mr. Historian here, I am an optimist, and not because I think that history is moving in a linear direction, or even in Dr. King's direction of the arc of history bending towards justice. I don't think there's anything automatic about it. I think that people like us have to keep working at it.
So you think there's hope?
Oh, of course, I think there's hope.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I've been very pessimistic lately, like Beth. I've been very pessimistic like her.
Yeah. It sounds to me, and I don't want to misquote you, but it sounds to me that you're at least somewhat optimistic that the United States is headed in a right direction. Maybe not as fast as it should, but it sounds like you're at least reasonably optimistic about it. Is that a true statement?
Well, I don't think our government is headed in the right direction. I don't think our economy is headed in the right direction. I don't think our dominant culture, that what comes out of Hollywood, that's headed in the right direction. But I think that on the ground, in our neighborhoods, or as you described your schooling, Mike, and I think about my schooling as a teenager, the interaction with the kids that I shot hoops with, or the kids that I bopped out to the same music with, or the kids that told stories in classrooms, that I think at a grassroots level, we have the resources to move in the right direction. And I think that unions give us some of the leverage in the economy. Political activism gives us some of the leverage in the governmental sphere. I think it's possible, and so I'm certainly not giving up.
Good.
Absolutely, this has been fascinating. Mike, you have more?
Yeah, I got a couple more here.
Please,
something that we touched on early in tonight's show, or this afternoon show, depending where you are in the U.S., is we talked about people being rounded up on the street corners simply based on the color of their skin, or where they might be at, or what jobs they might be in. Yeah. And again, a little bit of my background. I've belonged to 3 different unions. I belong to the Meat Cutters Union. I belong to the Sheriff's Union. I belong to the Retail Clerks Union, which is how I met William, believe it or not. So I've belonged to 3 unions. I'm a firm believer that that's a great leveling playing field, where everybody that did my job, regardless of their color, their age, anything else, we all got paid the same. We all had the same benefits. I like that level playing field. So I've just got to throw that out there. As far as rounding up people on the street in law enforcement, and I'm really shocked at the Supreme Court, in law enforcement, you have to have what's called reasonable articulable suspicion to engage with people other than just saying hi. And you had to have probable cause to detain someone. And this is in direct violation of what I learned as a law enforcement officer, that if I'm going to engage you and I'm going to restrict your movements by keeping you standing there talking to me, I'm violating your constitutional rights, illegal searches and seizures. And I'm absolutely, I can't understand why the Supreme Court would side that way, that it's okay to just round people up. And we talked a little about Hitleristic ramifications that came from his reign of terror. And in reference to Hitler, I taught classes about leadership and stuff. And what a lot of people don't understand is inspiration. People that inspire other people, they can do it for good, and they can also do it for evil. So one of the examples I give is, like, can somebody give me a representation of somebody that was good, that used their inspiration to inspire people to be at their best? And a lot of good answers came up. Churchill came up, sometimes Ronald Reagan came up, and whatever. And it was kind of sporadic how the class answered. But the one I said, can somebody give me an example in the last 100 years of somebody used their ability to inspire, but they did it in a negative way? The whole class immediately, Hitler, 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 Hitler. So inspiration is what really counts, and you have to do it for good and not for evil. Let's see. So my philosophy on dealing with people is leave people the hell alone. If they're not hurting themselves and they're not hurting others, and they want to be a male living their life as a female or vice versa, leave people alone. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of your own damned happiness. That's my philosophy. So I don't know. You can pick on any of those things I just mentioned, sir.
Well, it prompts me to tell a little story about a piece of theater which is about to be remounted in Detroit. And it is called Forgotten, subtitled Murder in the Ford Rouge. And this is a musical. The Steve Jones, the writer, calls it a jazz opera. And it is set in 1937 in the River Rouge plant, which was then this remarkable factory just outside of Detroit that began at one end by making steel, and at the other end, finished automobiles came out.
Wow.
And the center of the story is a radio show. And this is a true story, that there was a guy in Detroit who started a radio show that he called The Forgotten Man's Hour. And he got a radio station to put it on head to head against the most popular show in Detroit at the time, which was Father Charles Coughlin, who was a Hitler sympathizing Catholic priest.
Oh, wow.
A radio show. And the play becomes about the fight between these two radio shows.
Wow.
And auto workers are listening to them and receiving them and being impacted by them. The music is fantastic. The director is an African-American woman named Elise Bryant. So I think you can even find it on YouTube.
Oh, that would be nice. It sounds like the only opera I might be interested in seeing.
Yeah, I think you would love it. But it shows how important something like radio was, and perhaps
Still
is now. How we can find, and Coughlin is a big figure with a big following, and here's this relatively anonymous guy who has started in competition with it. And ultimately, the workers at the River Rouge successfully unionize.
Wow.
And one of the great people produced by those struggles was a brother named General Baker. I loved the way, one of the things I learned as a student of African-American history was the way some African-American families used names as a way to command respect from white people. So they named their baby General. And that was what white folks had to call him.
Right.
And he rode that story into becoming a major labor activist in the 1950s and 60s.
Wow.
And someone I was fortunate to learn a lot from.
And somebody who's so optimistic, you were just talking about at that time,
Yeah.
the radio being, I guess, what we have the internet being for us today. We've got people who can throw text messages at you unwarranted. Obviously, there's television. Then you've got the internet, and there's so much out there. Some of it is actually factual and dependable, but there's so much trash and misinformation. And I can understand how people could be hard pressed in some situations to figure out what's right and what's wrong. Is it the same playing field as what you were just describing between those two radio shows going head to head, or are we in a situation that is so uniquely different that the playing field isn't level anymore?
Yeah, I don't think it's so uniquely different. I think it's rhyming. And I think that that I talk to young people who spend a lot of time with podcasts. That I think things are very decentralized. And then we see CBS, NBC, ABC, but maybe a lot of people just aren't paying any mind to them. I think, as I say, on the ground at the grassroots, there's a lot of conversation that can take place, and I think that we have a responsibility to be in there, both with the people that we think agree with us and with the people that we think have got it all wrong. We've got to be in conversations.
I agree with the conversation part. It can just be so frustrating sometimes. And I can see how people's relationships are devolving. I mean, I've read about literally people getting divorced, family members not speaking to one another. I've seen it, at work. There were a group of men who every morning, before 2016, let you know how long I've been on my job, they got together, they talked like the first half hour and a half that they were there. They did lunch together, they sat over newspapers, drank coffee and whatnot. And then around 2015, 2016, their relationships just deteriorated to the point where they couldn't even talk to each other anymore. The two of them that were left, because one of them had retired at that point. And one of them used to talk to me like, I just, I don't understand. and so I've seen it. How do you respectfully, have these conversations and protect relationships? Without, getting frustrated, without, just saying, I'm done with you. I mean, how do you do this?
Well, I'm going to dodge that a little bit.
I don't blame you.
A little bit. And I want to talk about the conversations that we have with people who are inclined to see things perhaps the way we see things. We have started at the Eastside Freedom Library right after Trump took office. We started something that we call Resilience Happy Hour. And every other Friday afternoon from 4:30 to 7 o'clock, we invite people to come together. And it's not that we're brilliant. We've really found our way through this to strategies. And we've developed a strategy where we begin, and I think some of this was out of the necessity that every time we all came together, there were new people. And we didn't want to make the new people uncomfortable, like, introduce yourself.
Right, right.
We'll all introduce ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so we began asking, we would be in a circle. We've had, typically between 20 and 40, 45 people. And we go around and we say, introduce yourself and tell one story about something that inspired you in the last 2 weeks. And because we said, we might all agree, and then we have a conversation about how terrible everything is.
Right.
And we go home feeling worse
Right,
than
right.
we came in feeling. Let's collect inspiring stories. And we have people who are active in the labor movement, in the immigrant rights movement, in the movement for racial justice, in the environmental movement, in the women's movement, and people would tell a story. And then we would say, now in the latter part of the meeting, go have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who told a story that interested you.
Wow.
And maybe you didn't know them at all. And it has helped us keep our spirits up. It's helped us learn from each other in different movements. What's a strategy that works? It's so much more compelling than the big marches that we go participate in a big march and then we go home and nothing has changed. And we say, what was all of that? But we're building community through having these story sessions.
I agree.
And it encourages me and keeps me going. And I think makes us stronger than to have those more difficult conversations with the people that we may disagree with, because we can say, well, I just heard this. And this sister just told me that. And this brother just told me this other. And this is a way that we're not alone in having these conversations.
I saw something that inspired me a couple of weeks ago at my son's school. I was picking him up, and these two girls, they were walking together. One was walking to her car, a little white girl and a little black girl, and they hugged each other. I mean, and then they did it again the next day when I happened to see them. And I'm like, oh God, I needed that. I really needed something just that small, just that sweet, to see that, perhaps, the world we're leaving for the next generation, they'll be able to fix it.
That's right.
Or they won't accept it. And Tierra, thank you for being back. And I apologize. I thought it was Mr. Peter that was leaving in the first half hour, and we were supposed to bombard him with questions. I didn't realize you were the one who was leaving, or I wouldn't have interrupted you.
Oh, I'm back. I'm back, and I'd like to take advantage of having we'd be remiss to have a historian on here and not, ask him some historical questions. So, being that you're an expert on Richmond, Virginia, when I was taking your class, there was things that I learned, and when I was reading your book, there was things that, like my view of slavery was narrow. I realized how narrow it was. It was more broad, and it wasn't always the the white family that had like a farm or a plantation and just had Negroes living on the farm. I'm going to read a little excerpt from your book where you were talking about the autonomy that the slaves had in Richmond, Virginia, because it wasn't the traditional type of Little House on the Prairie looking slave atmosphere environment that you pictured. These slaves were actually working in industrial mills and things of that nature. So you said slaves and other occupations also enjoyed a good deal of autonomy in their daily lives. They were teamsters, boatmen, stevedores, carpenters, plasterers, shoemakers, and barbers chose and controlled much of their work. One more time, they chose and controlled much of their work, earning money, slaves, for themselves as well as their owners. Most found their own lodging, married, and raised families despite the uncertainties of slave life, and the systems of hiring out and self-hire often operated in unskilled as well as skilled work. I don't think the average person knows that there was situations where slaves were hiring themselves out. And you gave, I just want to say this, you told a story in this book where this, I believe it was a judge, was looking for a slave that had a few particular skills. And he was interviewing, I believe it was a lady, and to see a slave, a woman enslaved, I guess, is the best way to put it. And to see if she would be best to come and work for him for the following year. And at the end of the interview, the slave told the judge, well, let me check your credentials to see if you're an actual honest man. And I'll get back to you and let you know if I'll take that work. And it was another lady who was from deeper in the South who witnessed this whole conversation, who was flabbergasted, like,
right,
they have going on here.
Normally happen. That is not the way it normally works.
Right. So can you speak on it? Because we don't know slavery like we think we did.
Right. Hey, let me jump in real quick. The rabbit had the gun. I'm sorry.
Well, I think there are other pockets like Louisiana, New Orleans. They had some atypical stuff going on there too, in terms of slavery. So yeah, you could please do.
Tell us about this atypical stuff that we don't know about.
Well, as I said, the first book I read in graduate school was this industrial slavery in the Old South, and what I came to understand was that in urban areas, enslavers often did not, and here's the racial capitalism part, the capitalism side of it, the enslavers did not want to have to provide housing and meals, and so they basically said, you to the enslaved person, you get a job, you earn a wage, you pay me so much of it, and you're responsible for your housing and your meals, and so, I mean, one of the things that I found, I started my research asking the question, what was the transition from slavery to freedom like for enslaved men and women who had worked in Richmond? And my answer was they didn't see much difference, that there was Monday and then there was Tuesday, that things were pretty similar, which also says that the life of a wage worker, had its own limitations and restrictions. I think that what I have come to understand since is really, and it's a great example, I think, of this idea of a conversation between the past and the present, that historians who wrote about slavery until the middle of the civil rights movement, so for 100 years, historians who wrote about slavery either were sympathetic to the enslavers and wrote about how benign and paternalistic and generous they were, or they were sympathetic to the enslaved men and women, and they wrote about what victims they were, how miserable their lives were. And then we had the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And suddenly people throughout the United States saw Black children standing up to fire hoses, standing up to the police or the military, standing up to the Klan. And people who began to study history began to ask, wow, if these Black children can do this now, are we right that they just gave in during slavery? Maybe there was resistance then too. And in the midst of all of that intellectual turmoil, one scholar, a white guy named George Rawick, who had been heavily influenced by the West Indian scholar activist C.L.R. James, Rawick discovered, and it's crazy to call it a discovery, but he discovered that in the 1930s, the federal government, the New Deal, had created a jobs program for unemployed academics and unemployed graduate students. And the jobs program was to take tape recorders and go into the South and find living, formerly enslaved men and women and record their life stories. And that became known as the WPA, Works Project Administration, the WPA Slave Narrative Project. 2,000 Black men and women got their stories recorded.
Wow.
And the federal government at that time had no concept, no plan. What were they going to do with those histories? And so they took all of those tapes and they put them on shelves at the Library of Congress, and they sat there from 1938 to 1968.
Amazing.
And George Rawick, I knew George a little bit, and I think what he must have thought when he discovered these these are these big reel-to-reel tapes, the kind of tapes that that Black music got recorded on in the 30s, and he began to transcribe those tapes, and he ultimately published 66 volumes of the WPA slave narratives. And he wrote an introduction called The American Slave from Sundown to Sunup, the Making of the Black Community. And it's all about what, again, to use an academic word, what we call agency. The agency that enslaved people had, not only in urban areas like Richmond and New Orleans, but the agency that they had wherever they lived.
That's right.
Manifested in folk tales, manifested in songs, manifested in ways of cooking, and manifested in running away and supporting people to run away. Now, a month from now, less than a month from now, on October 6th at the Eastside Freedom Library, we're going to host my old friend Marcus Rediker, who teaches at the University of Pittsburgh. And Marcus has written a new book, it's just come out, called The Freedom Ship. And the book is about the maritime Underground Railroad. And Marcus argues in his book that more enslaved men and women escaped by water than ever escaped over land.
Wow.
If they escaped by water, sailors must have
Skills.
supported them. helped them, fed them, hid them, stowed them away. It's a whole different way, again, of thinking about that working class in the South. And so I highly recommend Marcus's book, The Freedom Ship. His work is brilliant. He's made, Brother William, I'll send you, he made a video, a movie on what happened to the Amistad slaves after they escaped. You all know about the Amistad in 1833. A group of enslaved men on a ship. They revolted against the captain and the crew outside of Cuba. They ultimately sailed the ship all the way to Connecticut, but in Connecticut they were arrested and put on trial, but they were ultimately freed, and they were sent ultimately to Sierra Leone. And they lived the rest of their lives in Sierra Leone. And Marcus had this crazy, brilliant project to go to Sierra Leone and see what he could find of the story of the Amistad rebels. What did people in Sierra Leone know about them? Did they pass that story down from generation to generation? And he made a movie about it.
Wow.
And I will send Brother William the movie so you all can see it. So that if we could only get more of this history out,
right?
You know, it gets researched and written or made into a film, but it doesn't get into the classroom. It doesn't get onto the mainstream TV screen, doesn't get on the stage like this musical about the River Rouge. We've got we have the pieces of the puzzle. We just have to put them together in front of folk, and they will draw the right conclusion.
Absolutely. Peter.
Yes, sir.
You know, man, oh man, I am so fascinated. I've been sitting back. And I've been accused on this program of hogging all the time, Mike. All the time. But for me, this was a time to sit back and listen because I've been so fascinating. You are fascinating. I really appreciate you. And so I'm going to ask you right now because we need to do a part 2. We need to do a part 2 because the conversations that we're having right now, these are conversations that should be had. It should be had. Knowing our history, and you enlightened me to some things. I live in Richmond, Virginia.
Wow.
You wrote a book about Richmond, Virginia. And you were sharing some things with me that I didn't know. The information that you are disseminating is so invaluable. I can't tell you, my brother. And I'm going to ask you formally right now, what are you doing next Sunday?
It's a trap, Peter.
I told you he would work you. He'll overwork you if you let him.
I'm looking in my book.
This is what William does. He does what I call goat roping.
Why he will overwork you if you let him.
What are you trying to say, Mike?
You will be all right.
Well, I must say,
oh my God.
Pierre, I appreciate you for introducing us to Mr. Peter. He is a wealth of information. I want to say thanks to everybody who's tuning in to Vlora Brand. Thank you for being here. We're so glad to have you. Looks like this is testimony. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Tesla. I apologize for messing up your name. Thank you for being here. Hey, Emma, glad to have you with us. Bruce, thank you for tuning in. And Dr. Sims, glad to see that you were listening. Sorry you're not feeling well. We hope and pray you feel better soon. Anyway, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. Thanks to those of you who have shared. Please continue to do so. And all right, Mr. Peter, looks like you're ready to tell us, is William going to be able to rope you in for another week?
Yes, I hope so. I think this needs to be a series because I don't think that we can tell this in one broadcast. I was talking to Tierra before the show started, and he said, "How long?" We talked about how long the show. I said, "This is a 2-hour show," and he said, "2 hours? You want to interview him for 2 hours? Look, we could go on for 22 hours, and we still can't get it all." And Peter, man, love you, brother. Thank you so much for doing
Yes,
this.
thank you.
And Dr. Sim, she says, wow, I love the history. Yes, I do too, because this is what we need to know. And I think history is the foundation of future buildings. And you need to use these properly. I've got a question for you. And I'm thinking about Dr. Sims right now. Got a question, Peter. How much has the church contributed or destroyed the building and progression of where we need to be as a society?
Well,
that's loaded.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's like I think that like so many institutions, it has been both, positive and negative. I want to share an intellectual frame. Several months ago, I had the great opportunity to attend an event that a group that was honoring elder musicians in the local African American community. And one of them, who is, I'm fortunate, has been in my life now for 20 plus years, named Douglas Ewart, E-W-A-R-T. And Douglas is part of the association of for the promotion of the African American Association for Creative Musicians, based in Chicago. And Douglas makes his own didgeridoos and flutes, and brilliant. But he got up to give this talk, and he started with, "Let me tell you what I think about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the people who created the United States." And he said, "I like to call them the confounding fathers." And I thought, oh my God, I've taught history for 45 years.
Wow.
And I've never thought of that as a way to frame our history. It is confounding.
Yes, it is.
And I would say trying to understand the role of the church or churches or religious institutions or religion is a confounding question, a confounding experience. That for African Americans, and particularly in Richmond during the period of slavery, African Americans had their own churches. There was as I'm sure Brother William knows, there was the first African Baptist Church, and the second African Baptist Church, and the third African Baptist Church, and churches where, ironically, because of the ways that African Americans worshiped, white people stayed away because they were uncomfortable by the shouting and the singing and the physicality, and so they in many cases would not allow them to have an African American minister, not until after emancipation. But the churches were themselves a kind of safe space, a separate space within which people passed on the knowledge of how to read, the knowledge of how to write. That with emancipation, before schools got created, the churches were places where children would start to get the rudiments of an education. In some places, those churches functioned as outposts in the Underground Railroad, places where escaped people in fugitivity could be safe and could be fed and cared for and make the connections to move on further north. On the other hand, many white churches were spaces where white supremacy was preached, and organizations like the Klan were nurtured. And so it's very today in the car, I had the National Public Radio on and listening to arguments about this Charlie Kirk and whether he did say the United States was supposed to be a Christian nation or not. And of course we can all have debates about what does Christian mean? Does it mean that we are our brother's keeper? Is that the version of Christian? So it's confounding. And I hope that whoever raised that question doesn't think I'm dodging it by saying this. But I will say I think of myself as a Marxist and as someone who is interested in Hegel and Hegel's dialectics and the idea of contradictions. How do we think through contradictions? And and for a guy like Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence, in which he says all men are created equal, and yet he owned his own son, by way of the enslaved woman that he controlled for decades. So it's contradictions, it's confounding, and I will stop there.
It's also evidence. And I'm a lawyer, so I love evidence. It's evidence that you know that what you were doing was absolutely wrong. You can't say on the one hand, all men are created equal, and then turn around and own slaves as if you were completely oblivious to the fact that what you were doing was wrong. It's evidence that these people know exactly what they're doing, and they don't care so long as they are the ones who benefit. Dr. Sims has a question that she wrote. She wants you to ask if you're familiar with the Negro Bible, if you've ever heard of that.
I'm sorry, no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. I did read something about it, and there were so many pages out of the Bible that was left out of the Negro Bible, and we can get into that. Yeah. So so many books that were left out of
right.
The
they redacted the Bible basically. that's what they did.
Redacted. Big old black lines running through.
Right. Because they didn't want slaves to read.
Yeah, like the Epstein's files, but we move.
Right.
We'll move on. Okay. Yes. We'll come back. I've got a question. The elephant. There have been many elephants in the room. DEI. And when I heard someone say, "Well, that's a DEI hard," that's a. She said it's called the Slave Bible. I don't know whether it makes any difference to you, Peter, or not.
No,
but okay. Anyway, DEI. And when I first started hearing people bastardize that acronym DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I used to get so angry. But then I changed because I know what the real meaning of DEI is? And I said, yeah, call me a DEI hire because that means I had to be better than anyone else in order to get that job. Because
All
what
right.
DEI really is, see, this is the thing about it. And you have to be really careful about people who are trying to navigate something or describe something that's not true.
Mm.
Diversity, what does that mean? Equity, what does that mean? Inclusion, what does that mean? If you are someone about equality, then you would appreciate DEI. And then I started embracing, yes, I'm a DEI hire because that means I'm the best guy in the room. Because they said, well, it shouldn't be DEI, it should be based on your ability to be able to do, well, yeah, okay. It should be based on you being able to have the credential. Well, yeah, okay. I want you to be able to address it. It's based on merit.
Mm.
But you have to understand, if I don't get a chance to apply for that position, then you don't know what my merit is.
Mm.
You really don't know what skills I can bring.
Mm.
If you want to talk about DEI hires, and you want to use it in a negative form, you can look at that current administration.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Because none of these people, in my opinion, are qualified. You can go down from the AG all the way down to the anybody in this current cabinet aren't qualified. Pete Hegseth, and I take offense to this. When you want to move people from the archives, like Jackie Robinson, or you want to move people like the Red Tails, who are one of the most successful organizations. I mean, guys, that's out there as far as the military is concerned. How many lives did they save? They over I think over 1,100 sorties, and they did not lose one. Tuskegee Airmen, are you kidding me right now? And you want to remove that? We can go to Tuskegee Airmen. We can go to the Smithsonian Museum. Why, Peter, in your opinion, are these people trying to erase history? I'm gonna leave it right there.
Well, first of all, I have to say that there is this brilliant, committed African-American artist, activist, who calls himself Dred Scott. He spells Dred, D-R-E-A-D.
Right.
Not the way the enslaved man who became part of a Supreme Court decision. But Dred has created a T-shirt. I promise you, William, when we do the second show, I'll wear that T-shirt. I wanted to wear this one today.
Oh, let me enlarge that. In case
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let me. Oh,
Yeah, I don't see it.
agitator.
Agitator.
Ah,
Agitator.
okay. Awesome.
But Dred has made a T-shirt with DEI on the T-shirt. That is the same model as the ICE T-shirt, but it says DEI on the back and DEI on the front. I'll wear that for you. And check out his artwork. Among other things, he has done he has restaged the New Orleans slave rebellion, reenacted it. He's wicked and brilliant. And now he's made these DEI T-shirts. I think that, for people like Trump who want to edit out of history the history of resistance, the history of exploitation, they want a flat narrative,
Mm.
and which just is absolutely not true. And we used to joke. I went to a private liberal arts college that just as they were debating in the late 60s, early 70s, introducing affirmative action in their admissions policy, they continued to have what were called legacy admissions. Y'all know what legacy admissions are?
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
That if your mommy or daddy went there, then
You automatically get to
you
go.
go to the head of the line.
Mhm.
Well, pardon me, what are their qualifications?
Right.
And that has been the story in American higher education for 200 years.
Mhm.
So William is absolutely correct that if the system had been such that you don't even get to put your qualifications forward,
Mhm.
well, then the door there is no door. The door
Right.
isn't simply closed. There is
Right.
no door.
Exactly.
And I think that from the Smithsonian to our national parks to curriculum, we're still fighting here in Minnesota that 3 years ago, when the Democrats had a majority in the House and in the Senate and the governor's chair, that they passed a bill that ethnic studies should become part of the curriculum for 10th graders all across the state of Minnesota. That has not yet been implemented.
Mm.
Now there's fighting about, well, what do you mean by ethnic studies? And in the narrative in a place like Florida has been, we don't want to make white kids feel bad.
Oh my
And I'm sorry, but the truth is not going to make you feel bad.
Mm.
It's the truth that will set you free. Takes us back to Anne's questions about, why are some white people, listening to Trump and the MAGA narrative,
Mhm.
because they haven't heard the other story.
Mm.
They haven't heard how we
That's right.
got to where we are,
Mm.
and that they're being raised not to deal with difficulty.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, but we are swimming in difficulty, and we need to be preparing future generations to wrestle with difficulty.
May I tell a story that I think kind of goes to what you're saying, kind of illustrated. When I was in, I guess, 8th grade, going to 9th grade, I was chosen to go to a summer camp here in Arkansas, and it was at the Tech University in Russellville. It was interesting because everybody there was from Arkansas, but I literally met white kids who had never seen a black person before except on television. Um, and so they had these ideas in their head of what black people would be like. And then they met me and the other kids, and they were shocked because it was something totally different from what they had been exposed to, and their exposure had been obviously very, very limited. Um, is that basically what happens when you change history, when you change your school systems, to include just say, white people in a separate but equal, when you, even on Sunday mornings, don't want to worship with other people because of the way that they look, because you still have churches in the South that won't allow their churches to be integrated on Sunday morning. Is that where this limitation comes from? This, I guess, isolation mentality.
Let me just say, and then I know Tierre wants to jump in, that somebody said, and I don't remember who, but somebody said that in the United States, and this goes back to the question about churches, in the United States, 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the United States.
Yes.
I wish I could remember who said that.
Hey, Peter, 1 second.
Yeah, but don't
know
let's
which-
get Pierre in. But yeah,
No, I'm gonna let Thierry in, but let's stop right there. Our beloved Dr. Reverend Rudolph Dimmer, who passed away this year, he said the same thing. Tia, you know who Reverend Dimmer is. You know who Rudolph
Yeah,
Dimmer
no,
is.
he
You know
passed
him. He said the same thing. I don't believe this is the same person, but he said Sunday mornings is the most racist day of the week. And Mike just put up. Mike was there with Dr. Dimmery. Oh my God, Mike visited
Great
Dr.
man.
Dimmery.
Yes,
man.
yes.
What
yeah,
a Mike,
Honor and a privilege to meet him.
what
yeah.
a beautiful
And to
soul.
know him. Yeah.
What a beautiful soul.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Wow, wow,
Indeed.
wow. Tia,
Okay. Once again, I just want to take advantage of this man's breadth of knowledge on history.
Right.
Peter, can you tell us about Crispus Attucks?
Good one.
oh yeah. So Crispus Attucks was an escaped enslaved man who made it to Boston, Massachusetts in the 1760s. And what was going on in Boston when he got there was the British in 1763 passed a law. I mean, it's interesting. It sounds a little bit like Trump's tariffs. The British passed a law to try to direct all trade to Britain, that it wouldn't go to France, that it wouldn't go to Spain or the Netherlands. It had to go to Britain. And they would use taxes or tariffs as a way to control this trade. And they sent a bunch of soldiers to enforce it. And everything was cool until winter. And when winter came, the Boston Harbor froze. And there was no trade going back and forth. And some of the people over in England said, wait a minute, what kind of idea was this to make money? Because now we've got all these soldiers living in Boston and they're not bringing in any revenue because there's no trade to put the tariffs on. And we're losing money. And so the wise guys in the powdered wigs in Parliament said, we got an idea. What we're going to do is we're going to tell those people in Boston that they have to provide free housing and meals to the soldiers, like turning their house into an Airbnb. And so they did that, and then the soldiers said, we could make some money on the side since there's no soldiering to do with the harbor froze, and now we're being taken care of by these local folks. And the poor people who became soldiers in England were people who were unskilled workers. That's who got drafted into the British military. And so they went looking for unskilled jobs. And one of the major places that had unskilled jobs was something called the rope walks. And so all the ships relied on sales,
Mm.
SAIL, sales, on wind power. And they needed a lot of heavy rope to control the sails. And so there was a big industry to make the rope.
Mm.
George Washington got rich producing hemp, what we would call cannabis today. And that was what they made the rope out of. And it was utterly unskilled work. It was like a big warehouse. And human beings, men, would hold one strand of the rope, and they would have to walk all the way down the warehouse and meet the other guy, and they would tie the strands together. And so the owner, this is some serious racial capitalism. The owner of the warehouse, wanting to make more profit, said, where can I get cheaper labor? And so his first answer was, well, I can hire some escaped enslaved people because they used to just work out in the field picking cotton, and we can put them to work in the warehouse, and they'll work for lower wages because they're so thankful to just be out of slavery. And then he said, whoa, I could hire some of these British soldiers in the off season when the port is frozen, and they'll work for even less. And so they hired a bunch of British soldiers and laid off the local workers, including this brother Crispus Attucks. And so they, in January of 1770, they organized the equivalent of a picket line.
Wow.
To picket, to keep the British soldiers out. All sounds good until the British soldiers called them out for their manhood and said, you stay right here, we'll be right back, and we'll fight this out man to man. And they went back and they got their guns. And they came back and they fired on the picket line. And Crispus Attucks was the first man, white or black, the first man to die in the fight for American independence.
Wow.
And I was so moved when I moved to St. Paul, Minnesota in 1982 and discovered that there was a black VFW here in St. Paul named for Crispus Attucks. And when I asked my students at Macalester College if they knew who Crispus Attucks was, they didn't know. But a bunch of black ex-GIs who had organized the VFW, they knew who Crispus Attucks was, and they named their lodge after him in order to keep his memory alive.
Wow.
So, Tier, is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I thought that there was a fight between the picketers who were mad.
Right.
British were taking their job, the soldiers were taking their jobs, and I, from my understood, one of the soldiers kind of got beat down, and
then they went and got their guns.
And from what I think I got this from reading during your class, reading reading out of the book, but like the picketers were bragging that we beat you down the other night, and evidently Crispus Attucks was one of the main people bragging that we
wow
that we beat you down the other night, and the soldiers went back and got their guns, and so I kind of laugh at the story because I'm thinking, we know Crispus Attucks was the first, but we don't know the details.
Right.
So,
I told you guys the rabbit had the gun. Okay. And let's get back. Oh, I can't believe we have 6 minutes to go.
That's all.
And I will give the audience a chance to go. I mean, the commentators, the panelists, the co-hosts, to get a chance to go around the room. I knew that this broadcast would be great. I also knew this broadcast would be excellent. Peter, brother, you have a platform right here on the Buzz. You do.
Thank you.
We have several. We're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, in my opinion, some of the finest broadcasts you can find anywhere around the globe. Whether it's Mad Mike, Wild Will Coast to Coast, whether it's Ann Wooten Taylor eating as an act of Worship Ministries radio show. As a matter of fact, I said something to Ann. I said, Ann, this gentleman would be great to have on your Saturday show.
Yes, I agree.
Great.
I agree.
Yeah. And unless there's an opening in March of 2026, we don't have any openings on our Groove Swing Speak show.
Wow, that's
We are
nice.
booked all
That's
the
a
way until
blessing.
August.
Wow.
I mean
Nice.
March of 2026.
Wow, that's
Peter,
a blessing.
We got platforms. Hey, bro, I'm holding you hostage.
Getting goat
That makes
roped. I'm
me like
telling you,
to.
getting goat roped.
That
So
means he likes it a lot.
before we run out of time, I want to thank Tier for having made this
Man.
connection.
Yes.
I so
Man.
appreciate it, and am so thankful that we've stayed in touch, and that you're part of my life. So thank you, Tier.
Oh,
And no
that's-
problem. I wouldn't mind sending you back to with questions I didn't get to. So
Stop. Ask your question.
Well, he said he's coming.
He's got to have a,
William.
yeah,
I'm
he's
gonna
got a
come
fair
back.
time to answer the
I'm-
question too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not available next Sunday, but I am available the Sunday after that.
Okay, let's talk.
Okay.
Yeah, after the show, y'all
No,
will
no.
talk.
All right.
No. Okay, let me stop right now. Book it.
Please.
Can he please have a chance to tell people how to get his book?
book him down.
Right.
Look, I believe in nailing this.
I see
He
that.
said he was available this Sunday after, so it's booked.
We understand. We have 3 minutes. He still needs to tell people how to get his book,
How do
they
you get in
can,
contact with your
all
book?
that other stuff. Yeah.
Peter, thank you. Love you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, how can people reach you or learn more about you?
Sure.
Take your classes, like give us your everything.
Well, so the easiest email to remember is Peter at eastsidefreedomlibrary.org. That's pretty straightforward to spell and easy to find. I will respond to anyone who writes to me. I hesitate to encourage you to patronize Amazon, but Amazon is a way to get my book. You can reach out to the University of Illinois Press directly for the paperback, or you can go to your local independent bookstore and ask them to order the book for you.
And what's the title again?
Black Labor in Richmond, Virginia,
Awesome.
1865 to 1890.
Awesome.
So I would love it. There it is.
Yay. Love the cover.
Yeah. And the cover is a picture of African-American enslaved women working in a tobacco factory.
Wow.
So I was very happy to be able to get that picture on the cover. So I would be happy to hear from folks. There is a lot more, obviously, that we can talk about, and I'm thrilled to make this connection and to consider having more conversations.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Peter, it's already been considered. You coming back?
All right. All right.
It's been a pleasure.
You know,
Really
and
enjoyed it.
I really want to say this. In honor of my grandpa, Mike, I'll let you jump in, brother, right
No
after
problem.
this. in honor of my grandmother,
Mhm.
Emma Brown,
Mhm.
which my sister is named after
Aw.
Emma Brown. She worked in that tobacco in one of those tobacco
Oh.
factories you talked about, brother.
Wow. Wow.
As a matter of fact,
Wow.
I remember being
Wow.
in grade school, and she would get on the bus. I'm coming home, and she would sit next to me, smelling like tobacco. She didn't smoke. She did not smoke, but she
Mm.
was smelling because you worked in there. She did that physical labor,
Wow.
and the company she worked for was the American Tobacco Company.
Wow. Wow.
So with you doing what you do and the connection with me, it's dear to my heart, brother.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
So Virginia, love you, Peter. Man, okay, so we're gonna see you.
In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, William. Emma
yeah.
wants to know the name of the book. Your sister Emma, who's named for your grandmother, wants you to repeat the name of the book. Peter, if you don't mind.
Peter, if you will.
Black Labor in Richmond, Virginia,
Thank you.
1865 to 1890.
Thank you
Real
so
good
much.
book.
Your
Wow.
turn,
Thank
Mike.
you, Chair.
Your
Thank you.
turn.
And Mike
Yes.
Tier, thank you so much for
Can I-
introducing you to this beautiful brother.
Before we
Peter,
go away,
Mike,
I'd like to plant a seed
Mike, go ahead,
with
Mike.
Mr. Peter here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. Your information is outstanding, but I would like to plant a seed with you for you to think about for 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
In a perfect world, and I know this is a little unfair, but in a perfect world, what 1, 2, or 3 things would you suggest to make things better? And you can approach it from either a world standpoint or just a U.S. standpoint. So that one's coming up in 2 weeks, if you don't mind. And thanks again for being here, sir.
Good. Deep
Tier,
question.
good to meet you as well, Tier.
Yes, Tier. Thank you so much. Thanks for being
All
here.
right.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Tier was filling in. No, I asked the brother Tier to come in. He's not actually filling in because Greer was supposed to come on also, and Greer he's out of town.
Oh.
But yeah, he's out of town. And Dr. Sim, she was experiencing some physical difficulties, right?
Right.
But in the meantime, guys, thank you so much. I normally have a song already queued, so I'm going to do this one. Guys, thank you so much.
Have a blessed week, everybody.
Just don't sing. Just don't sing, William.
Radio show.
Don't sing, William.
Cool.
Oh, well, you know I can. Hey, don't play, Mike.
Thanks,
Hey,
everyone.
William, is this recorded? Can I
Yes.
get a copy?
Recorded,
Yes.
brother.
Will you send me a link to it so I can share it with folks?
It will be my pleasure.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Peter.
Stay well.
We're out. Mike, thank you.